Hey guys, it's springtime here, and spring is one of my favorite times of the year. Not only because of the weather, but also because we get to focus in on the essentials and really explore the possibilities of the horn. There's no competitions we have to worry about, there's no region band, there's no solo ensemble, so we can just focus on the things we really want to and take the time. It's not a rush. Today we're going to be talking about improvisation. And one of the things I notice as I work with my students, the problem that they have with starting out learning improvisation is that it's information overload. They're worried about the rhythm, they're worried about the notes. It's just too much to handle. I know there's a lot of methods that focus in on just the rhythms and taking one note and exploring rhythms, but to me that my students seem to get a lot of confusion with that. So what I've done is I've done a different method in which we focus in on note choices first without worrying about the rhythm. And what we do, that seems to help solidify note choices, because if you get that, most of the time that's going to make things sound good. And then adding rhythms is the much easier part rather than trying to learn about selecting notes. So the method that we're going to explore today is what we're going to do is first we're going to play everything in whole notes. And in a second I'll show you the blues within that. We're going to start with the blues. And you're only going to play whole notes rhythmically, and you're going to play the root. We're going to focus in on the root. Now there are some bars such as bar 4, which is a repeated bar from bar 3, the F major, as we do the F major blues, the F7. So in the bars that repeat chords, the second bar you get to do any note you want. And as you look at the example here, you'll see that there's an empty bar in bar 4, an empty bar in bar 6. And that in those cases you get to play any note you want. Doesn't have to be in the scale. Any note you want as long as it's a whole note. So that gets you a chance to explore in different things. So let's go through and let's do the blues whole notes on the roots, all right? So as we continue along with that, the next step would be doing the same thing except playing on the third. So we're going to do the same thing again, except this time we play whole notes and we're going to focus in on the thirds of the chord. And you'll notice as we go through, as I post up that piece, you'll see how the thirds work. Very similar to the roots, except for the thirds. So as we go through that, next we would go through and we would do the same thing on the fifths, same thing on the sevenths. Now, you could do this multiple times. Just don't do it once and say, I'm done. Explore different notes within that, because it's not about the notes that you choose on the free note. It's about how you resolve it. The most important thing about anything is not what note you choose, but how you resolve it. So I can go through in there and play weird notes, but as long as I resolve it to the correct chord tone, will be fine. And this gives an example of how, as long as we hit the roots or the fifths or the thirds in these examples on the downbeat, we're fine. Doesn't matter what note's happening just before that, as long as we resolve them correctly. So again, you can do this on the fifths, do this on the sevenths, dominant sevenths. Practice multiple times, different octaves within through it. You don't have to have that matchup. Next, then we would go through and we bump it up and we use half notes. So we'd go through and play half notes in the ball instead of the whole notes. So in bar 1, we have the root, and we have the F on the beginning part of the beat. The second half of the beat, as you notice on this the clip that I put up there, is empty. Any note I want to. Bar 2, first half of the bar, it's got to be the root. In this case, the B flat. Second half of the measure, anything you want. Bar 3 and 4, you notice how that on the beginning of bar 3, you have the root on there, but then you have 3 empty slots, 3 empty half notes that you get to do. Anything you want, as long as it's in half notes. And you can see the rest of that. So let's go through and let's look at the example of half notes on the roots. So you see how that works within that. The next thing we would go through is, you guessed it, half notes on the third. So let's hear an example of half notes using the thirds of the chord. And as I do this, I'm going to start creating lines. And it doesn't matter whether the note is in the chord tone or not on my choice. It's how it leads into the next note going into it. So always just think about, not when I'm thinking of the one chord and I play that half note at the beginning of the bar, I'm not worried about whether the second note is connected to the chord, the F chord. I'm worried about how it leads into the B flat, which is the next bar. Same thing in bar 2. Once I play my third on the downbeat, I'm worried about how the second half of the bar leads into the next chord. I'm not worried about whether the note fits in the chord that I'm on, but how it leads into, because that's where we're always going. Think you're traveling towards the next measure, not worried about, okay, I've landed, now let me mess around. Think about moving. Once you've landed, move to the next chord, and that's what this helps works on. So here we go. Half notes on the thirds. So the next part you would obviously guess is you'll do the thirds on the fifths, thirds on the sevenths. Practice that every day. Use different note choices. It's a way of variety up. Now, can you do this only on the blues? No, you can do this on any other chord changes. I like doing this on songs that I'm working on as a way of freshening up and livening up. Then the next step after you do this, obviously you can go to quarter notes. And by the time you're making quarter notes, your lines start making sense and you can start resolving to the next bar. And you'll find it's much easier. This is a great way of learning the chord changes, internalizing the notes of what's going on within that. That helps you out. So start practicing your improvisation using this. You know, you can check with your band director, you can check with anybody, or just get some chord changes within this. Now, while you're doing this, always have some sort of rhythmic activity going on to help you out. Right now, I'm using Band in the Box. That's why I got the headphones so I can hear it. Band in the Box. You can also use, there's a great app called Ruyle Pro, which you can type in some chord changes, or you can download some chord changes. If nothing else, you can even use a metronome, but to make sure you can hear the downbeat, to make sure it keeps your honest time. You always want to have some sort of time within you. Don't just trust yourself. Always have something that way. Again, these are great options for you. Next time, we'll talk about ways of adding some neat effects to our improvisation, half step, whole steps above, things like that, little formulas for more tricks and ideas for jazz improvisation. So, good luck practicing. See you next time.